Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, on today's episode, we are taking a look at a game that showed up in my itch.io feed, and I'm really excited to talk about this game today. And that is Flying Ostriches and Floating Castles. And this is a solo RPG that is a kind of a solo RPG of the old video game Joust. And I think imagine Joust maybe mixed in with some Laputa Castle in the Sky, that old Studio Ghibli movie. And you'd have a really good idea of what kind of game this is. This is a solo hex crawling adventure game. It can also be played competitively with one or two people going against each other. And basically in this game, your characters will be playing as these knights who fly on ostriches. And in this landscape that is a floating series of cloud islands and floating castles and all kinds of things in the sky. And you have a home castle from which you will take off and explore, trying to find weird technology, trying to discover dungeons and go in and get treasure, having jousting competitions with rival knights and trying to get money so you can buy new equipment. And over time, some kind of big event will be building up, and then it will erupt, and you will have to deal with some kind of major evil, and then that will basically signal the end of the game. And it's really, really cool. It's so charming. I love the world. I love the way it plays, and I love all the variety found in all of the various tables. However, before we jump into that game in more detail, I want to talk a little bit about its inspiration, about the games that it is based on, because those games we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about on the Dungeon Dive before. And Flying Ostriches and Floating Castles is directly influenced, directly based upon Troika by Daniel Sell. Troika, this game was sent to me a long time ago by the publishers, and they just wanted to thank me for my work I've done at the Dungeon Dive. They didn't expect me to review it or anything. And Troika is a game that I have read a lot, but I haven't spent a lot of time playing. But I love reading about the rules. I love reading about the world. And it's a super, super interesting game. So this is that Troika is a science fantasy role-playing game where you and your cosmopolitan group of fellow travelers explore the ends of the multiverse. You will fly on mystic barges, help dying gods, solve confounding crimes, plunder dead worlds, and meet strange and wonderful folk. So Troika is about as simple as an RPG can get, and still have a few crunchy mechanisms. It's very easy. And as I say very often, you can tell a lot about the complexity of a game based off of its character sheet. And so the character sheets for Troika are very simple. We have your name and your background, and then you only really have three stats: skill, stamina, and luck. And stamina is basically your HP. Skill is how good you are at doing things. Luck is kind of like a currency that you can spend to get out of bad situations or to help your good situations become better. And then armor will protect you from damage, and some provisions you can eat in order to gain some more stamina. And then you will also have special skills. I think one of the most interesting things about Troika is its character creation. And to determine your skill, 1d6 plus 3. 2d6 plus 12 for your stamina, 1d6 plus 6 for your luck. But the really interesting part comes in the backgrounds. And this is a D66 roll where you can have all kinds of different backgrounds for your character. So there are 66 different classes or backgrounds and things to make your characters different from one another. Things like a befouler of pawns, a burglar, a cacogen, a claviger, a chaos champion, an epopt. I don't know what that is. A lonesome monarch, a gremlin catcher, a monkey monger, members of Miss Kinsey's Dining Club, a necromancer, a poorly made dwarf, a questing knight, a rhino man, a fellow of the Sublime Society of Beefsteaks, the sorcerer of the College of Friends. And so each one of these will have, it's kind of like a little package. and you will have a little backstory. You will start off with some possessions, and you will start off with some advanced skills. And the way that this game works, the rules are quite simple. In order to do something unopposed, you take your skill. So if my skill was a 7 and I was trying to climb something, then I would take 2d6 and I would have to roll a 7 or under to attempt that skill. However, if I had the special skill of climbing and it was at a rank of 2, then I would add that 2 to my skill, which would make it a 9. And so then I would have to roll a 9 or under. Very, very simple. That's how you do just about everything in the game that's not opposed. If it's opposed, then you do opposing rolls and you're looking to roll high. So we'll say the black d6 here are an enemy's d6. And they have an overall skill of 7 for melee combat. And then let's say I have a skill of 6 plus swords, and I have a rank of 2, and I'm using a sword. So I would have a skill of 8. They would have a skill of 6. You roll, you total, including your skill and your special skills. Whoever has the highest wins. And then you also have a damage roll modifier or a damage matrix to determine how much damage you do. And so the damage is kind of governed by a table depending on what weapon you are using. But the bestiary is the same as well. A dragon, a skill of 16, a stamina of 32, an initiative 8, an armor of 4. So armor prevents damage, blocks damage, and then they will have their damage rolls and their special skills. And then each of the enemies in Troika also has a mean. And that is how they react when they when you come across them for the first time. So maybe this eco dot might be dormant or stationary or tentative or cautious. A feather folk, they might be sincere or rapt or doubting. And so each one of the different enemies has a different mean and a different way that they might react to you. A different type of skill that they will use in combat or in parlaying with the character. So just a really neat system, a really neat world. It's super creative and inventive, and it's very weird. It's the kind of weird fantasy that I really enjoy. But Troika was also just not an original game. It was based upon not loosely, the mechanisms were pretty similar to the advanced fighting fantasy. So Troika kind of took the advanced fighting fantasy system, of course, from Steve Jackson and Ian Livingston, founders of Games Workshop there. And they kind of ran with it in a completely different direction, changed a little bit of the systems, but advanced fighting fantasy, if you are familiar with this at all, you will feel right at home with Troika, and you will also probably feel pretty well at home with flying ostriches and floating castles. But Advanced Fighting Fantasy is a pretty cool little system. It's very simple. These books are getting harder and harder to find. These are the only 2 I have. There were 4. I'm missing Out of the Pit and Titan. So those are the 2 I'm missing. Titan I would love to get because it's all about the world of fighting fantasy. But I think that one is really, really expensive. Black Sand is pretty cool. Black Sand is all about urban adventures. And it has the port city of Black Sand. And that is a very, very detailed city that you can have adventures in. And most of this book is just detailing the things that you might find in the port of Black Sand. And I think it's pretty cool. It's a neat system, very similar. All of the mechanisms are basically the same that I just described in Troika. And it's interesting because it calls the Dungeon Master a director. And the heroes are actors. They're in the cast. And so it uses the language of film to convey to the players how to play it as a role-playing game. And then, of course, Advanced Fighting Fantasy, of course, was an offshoot of the original Fighting Fantasy solo game books that so many of us, this was kind of our ground zero. This was our first step into this world of tabletop gaming and hobby games. But it's just an interesting lineage. I like looking at this kind of stuff. I like going down these kinds of rabbit holes when I find something and then look, oh, it was based on this, and then that was based on that. And so you can usually trace back to some interesting things. But let's get to flying ostriches and floating castles. Talk a little bit about it, and then maybe we'll take a couple of sample turns. I'll talk a little bit about what I have discovered so far in my hex crawl. So let's read a little bit about this first. Flying Ostriches and Floating Castles is a solo or player versus player game of exploring hexes, treasure hunting, dungeon crawling, turtle chatting, surviving the end of the world, and jousting on ostriches. This is a self-contained, GM-less system. All you need to play is a handful of D6s, a pencil, and some paper. And so the game package that you can buy on itch.io, it comes with your rule book. So this will have everything that you need to play, all of the details. It'll come with an appendices book, and these are all of the random tables of the things that you'll discover while you are flying around these great open expanses of sky. And man, the random tables in this game are really cool. There's a lot of really neat things to discover. And then it also comes with a GM-less screen, and this is kind of just a summary of some of the major tables and some of the things you might need to play the game. You will also get a character package here of all of your character sheets and information sheets that you will need to play the game. So my character I am playing as is Sir Randy Barlow. He is a mercenary, and in this game, instead of the D66 backgrounds, we have 6 different backgrounds. Our character can be a clone, a stable hand, an engineer, a housecarl, a knight, or a mercenary. And character creation is very simple. You take a 1d6 plus 3 for your skill. Your stamina is a 2d6 plus 12, and your luck is a 1d6 plus 6. And so Sir Randy Barlow here, his skill is a 6. Stamina was 22. Luck is 12. And then we have 6 different advanced skills in this game: cloudology, jousting, melee, ostrich flying, tinkering, and tuck and roll. And then to determine your starting rank in those, you take a d6 and you roll that 3 times. And whichever number you roll from 1 to 6, you add a rank 1. So I rolled a 2 for jousting, a 5 for tinkering, and a 1 for and a 6 for tuck and roll. So my skills are your base skill plus your rank. So my cloudology is a 6, jousting 7, melee 6, ostrich flying 6, tinkering 7, and tuck and roll 7. So whenever I need to do those, I need to roll 2d6 and meet or roll under. So you're looking for low rolls when you're trying to do individual skills. You can keep track of your encounters. These are your combat encounters, and as you go through groups of 4 of those, you will add to the die rolls on the encounter charts. So as you get better, as you start having more encounters, your encounters will get more dangerous. And then let's see, my ostrich is a color of orange, and the color is important because that kind of determines their species. And there are different colors of ostriches. There are 6 different colors. And if you ever meet a wild ostrich that is the same color as your ostrich, there is a less of a chance that they will attack you. They will recognize that they are part of the same species. So that's kind of cool. My ostrich's name is Charlie. My ostrich has a skill of 5, a stamina of 20, and they do 1d6 plus 4 damage. Unfortunately, there really isn't a place to put your ostrich's damage total. I'm not sure why. Maybe because they're all the same. I'm not sure. But then you also have a whole bunch of different trackers. And one of the main trackers is the countdown tracker. When this completely fills up, that triggers the end game and the world kind of changes. Certain big evils come into the world and the hexes change, and you have to deal with that in order to win the game. And certain actions you take, certain things that you explore will tell you to add to your countdown. So you don't need to keep track of this on a turn-by-turn basis. You will be told when to add to your countdown. And so there is an in-game goal in this game, and you can play up to 3 characters. So if your first character dies, you can roll up another one. If they die, you can roll up a final character. And when that final character dies, then it's game over if you haven't defeated the big evil yet. And your map that you're playing in is persistent in that campaign through that for all 3 of those characters. And then other things that you might come across during your adventures, you can keep track of duration because you will have to revisit places to make certain things happen. And one of the things you can do from one character to the next is you can buy strong boxes. These are like lockers that you can keep in your home castle. And your subsequent characters will have access to those items. So when you start a new character, you're not starting from ground zero. So it has a little bit of that rogue legacy style of gameplay, of that character progression, that world progression that I enjoy so much. And so that is one more thing that I really appreciate about this game. And then we have some other places to keep track of things there, some more duration. And then in your character packet, you will also get a place to where you can keep track of all of your enemies. I recently fought a murder dodo, and they had a skill of 6, a stamina of 7, an armor of 0, and they did 1d6 plus 3 damage. And then you will also get some hex paper. And so you can print out your hex paper here. And when you originally set up your world, you will pick one hex. It can be anywhere for your home base. If you are playing multiplayer, each of you could pick a base on opposite ends of the map. And you can add other map sheets to this if you want to explore further. I think for a solo game, I would just keep it as one. And I think that's just enough to explore. But here we have my home castle, and these are the hexes that I have explored so far in this game. We have a cloud bank here. We have a cloud island, which is unexplored. In this hex are thunderstorms. We have a cloud island, and that's a guarded nest. So there are eggs there, and it's guarded by a green ostrich who will attack you if you don't evade it. And you can attack the ostrich and then take its eggs back to your home to sell, because ostrich eggs are very valuable in this world. Here we have a floating castle, and it's abandoned. And so I can go there, and I can land on that castle, and I can have a little dungeon crawl event. And in this hex here is turbulence. And so let's talk a little bit about how you play the game. And we'll take a look first at the rule book here. So we have character creation. I've talked about that mostly. It goes through your encumbrance, getting better as you perform skills, as you perform your special skills. You can tick these little circles going up, and then you can make a roll at a certain point in order to roll under how many ticks you have in order to go up a rank. And then if you fail that roll, you have to go back to your home castle and spend, I think it's 50 silver in order to retrain, in order to reset that roll so you can try again. But you can try at any time, but you want to make sure to have a certain number of those circles ticked before you try, so you don't have to pay that retraining fee. When you are at your home base castle, you can sell items that you have found. You can sell those ostrich eggs. You can sell the various pieces of ancient and modern or alien technology that you have found. And you can also buy new weapons. You can buy new armor, and you can buy these supplies, including those strong boxes. And then it goes into how to handle your hex map. And you basically will roll 2d6, look up charts on here, and then from each table will point you to certain subtables. And so you keep rolling until you have determined the feature of that hex. You can have things like open sky, various sky features like a thunderstorm, a cloud bank where you might get ambushed. There could be turbulence, and you can find cloud islands. Cloud islands can be unexplored, in which case you can go there and you can explore the island to find certain things. And then you can take these things called cloud chisels, and you can actually chisel out that cloud island, the unexplored island, into a shape of a dragon or an ostrich or a castle. And then you can turn those unexplored cloud islands into permanent features, which is really cool. And those will give you certain bonuses. You can become lost. You can get attacked by these misty stalkers there. You can have an unsettling experience. And the unsettling experiences are one of the things that will cause you to have to tick that countdown chart down. And the more unsettling experiences you have, the closer you will get to the end of the game. So where were those? Let's see. Here we go. So Appendix B here, we have the unsettling experience. And that's a D66 roll. And so these are all kind of weird things that will happen, weird little stories that will happen that will signal the end of the game. I think that's really cool. Then you can also come across floating castles, and they can either be abandoned or they can be owned by rival knights. If they're owned by rival knights, you can challenge those knights to jousting competitions, which is kind of the main thing about this game. It is a RPG based on Joust, right? And as you joust them, you might be able to take over their castles. If the castles are abandoned, then you can do a cool little dungeon crawl, and we'll talk a little bit about the dungeon crawl there. We have abandoned nests. We have mountain peaks where you can find mystical enchanted weapons. You can go jousting. And then there are a whole bunch of different encounters. And the bestiary is pretty charming here. We have the air wolf, a wolf with some blades, like a little helicopter. We have flying turtles. And flying turtles fly around the world, and they just like to get into random conversations. And there's a series of random conversation tables that are really funny. And it's kind of like this little conversation mini game. And turtles, they also want gifts. And so you can give them gifts in order to learn certain things about the world. We have hunters. We have pterodactyls, renegade housecarls, sky jellies, merchants, murder dodos, UFOs, thundors, the undead knight. So yeah, just really, really cool. And then you can set traps in castles for other players if you're playing a player versus player game. And then this is one of my favorite things, this ancient technology. And so when you find this ancient technology, you have to roll up on these charts, and then you combine the items into these funny names. So one thing I found was a frictionless graviton accumulator. And that has a value of 2 and 1, so a value of 3. If I find more of these pieces of ancient technology, I can combine them and then roll under the technology total in order to turn those things into special items. And those special items can be any kind of weird magical technology that might help your character fly or might help them in combat. Just really, really cool. I love that idea. And then once we get into section 8 here, that's the countdown. And so that is that overall timer for your campaign. And then once that ticks up, you'll turn to section 8 here, and that will tell you how to handle the end game and what changes in the world take place, what's going on, and then what you want to do to win the game. And then we have a few special optional rules here in the back. So that's all of your rules. You will be looking at this. You will be looking at both books while you play. So that is one thing about this game. You will be bouncing back and forth between these two books. But your appendices book here, this is all of the random tables. And so you start here by when you go into a new hex, what you find, and then each one of these is a subtable that corresponds to one of those things. We have all of our encounter tables. There are 3 different encounter tables, and those are encounters that you will find in either your open hexes, your open sky, or your cloud banks. So those will correspond to that bestiary that we took a look at here. And as you go up in tables, the encounters get more dangerous. And then here we have our jousting outcomes. And what's interesting is when you joust, you are flying around, so you can be knocked off your ostrich and just fall to your death. I think that's pretty cool. It's actually pretty easy to die when you're jousting if you have some bad luck. There are a couple special enemies that you might come across, like a Misty Stalker or a One Tooth. And so they have their own special charts when you are attacking them. And then here we come into our unsettling experiences. Let's take a roll here. We'll do red first. 46. So if you were to come across an unsettling experience of 46, you would take a look here and find that the low-lying mist coalesces into a sphere about a yard across. As it drifts and bombs across your path, you see within it what appears to be a face, eyes wide, and with abject terror. Interesting. So all kinds of different things there. And then here we have our ancient technology. And this is really cool. So when you find a piece of ancient technology, you roll a D66 3 times. So let's create one here. We find a 24. Okay, so a 24 is a frictionless. So that's one I've already got. So let's do another 26 here. We find a grass-fed, which is a technology 2. So a grass-fed 21. Ectoplasm 15. Ectoplasm is 1 and a 15. Condenser. So a grass-fed ectoplasm condenser. So that has a technology level of 2 plus 1 plus 2 is 5. So if I were to combine that with my frictionless graviton accumulator, which has a value of 3, that would give me a value of 8. So then I can make a technology roll and roll an 8 or under in order to combine those into a cool item. And here we have all of our ancient technology devices. So let's see what I would have combined. 52. I would have made, by combining those two pieces of technology, I would have made a pest spray, one use and only effective against beast enemies. During melee, roll versus to spray an enemy. Then on your turn, try to flee or disengage somehow. If you can avoid defeating this enemy, it will return to its lair and poison others of its kind. After 1d6 plus 6 turns, so this is where you would want to keep track of that duration on your character sheet here. It will not appear again. If you ever roll it on an encounter table, nothing will happen on that turn. Wow, so you completely eliminate that entire species. That's crazy. That's super cool. But let's see what else we have in here. Different things that you can find on mountain peaks. You can find these magical weapons, such as like maybe a tarnished axe of misfortune on the mountain peaks there. Here are the tables for when you have those random conversations with the flying turtles. You start on table 1, and then you will bounce around from tables 1 to 4. Each subsequent roll on the same table, you add 1. And then if you ever get up to 9 or higher, then the conversation ends. So really cool little conversation, a mini game. You have different flying turtle gifts. But once your campaign countdown track fills up, then you will turn to Appendix E, and that'll give you the tables that you need to complete your end game. So one of the things you can do is you can explore castles. And this is a cool little dungeon crawling mini game where you will start and you will have a little piece of graph paper and you will keep track, kind of like a point crawl system, where you are going through different castles, exploring them, fighting enemies, dealing with traps, and looking for treasure. And the castle has its own bestiary when you are exploring castles. And then you have these different charts here for exploring your castles, how many exits. So it has a really cool little dungeon dungeon generation, how many directions you can go, how many exits, and then all of the different things that you can find in the rooms while you are exploring those castles, and the different types of encounters you will have, and the different kind of treasure you will find in those castles. As soon as I started flipping through this appendices book, I knew I was in for a good time. And and I discovered that, hey, I was in for a good time. This game is great. I love this game so much. It is so charming. It's just kind of the perfect little level of solo hex crawling adventure game. So let's take a couple turns. I didn't explore that castle here. And let's see, what happened to my character? So my first thing I did is I flew up here. I got lost in a cloud bank. And I didn't have an encounter, but I flew around and I had to leave a random direction. I ended up back home at my castle. And then I went here and there's turbulence here and I got blown off course and I got blown into that cloud bank and I got attacked by a murder dodo. I defeated the murder dodo and then I went here to explore this island. There was a cloud island here that was unexplored. And I came across that piece of ancient technology, the fictionless graviton accumulator. And then I flew south here into a thunderstorm, and I got struck by lightning. I went home to heal up. I went over here to this island, and that was a guarded nest, and that was guarded by a green ostrich. I was able to evade the ostrich. I didn't want to attack it. I didn't feel like taking its egg. And there is a chance where your ostrich can fly off. Your ostrich can drop you off, and maybe your ostrich gets into combat on its own, and it flees, and it leaves you, and you're stranded. And then your home castle will send out a courier with a new ostrich for you to rescue you. But as payment, you have to bring back an egg. So you do have to kind of go off and harvest those eggs from those nests in order to keep your stock of ostriches supplied. I think that's just super cool. It's such a neat little detail, a neat little touch. And then I flew up here and that's where I found that abandoned castle. But then I flew back and I did buy some things. I bought a mace. I bought some modest armor. Modest armor gives you 2 points of armor and it takes up twice the amount of armor in location slots. So it takes up 4 spots. And then I did buy some cloud chisels because I do want to go out and chisel some of these cloud banks into certain things in order to help me, in order to create some safe spaces for me while I'm traveling. But let's go down here into this unexplored hex here and let's see what we find. So we'll take a look here at our hex map, and we will roll a D36. So we'll do reds first. Okay, so that's 32. 32 is a cloud island. Okay, what kind of cloud island do we have here? We have a 4, an abandoned nest. Okay, so abandoned nest right next to a guarded nest. So I'm going to write CI for cloud island. I will draw a little cloud island here. And that's a guarded nest, and this is an abandoned nest. And this is hex number 7 that we're exploring here. So let's go ahead and write 7 here, and we have an abandoned nest. Okay, abandoned nest, and this says to see the rules pages 7 through 12. So let's turn to our rule book here, pages 7 through 12, and let's find our abandoned nest and see what it says about that. So you can leave the ostrich feed at an abandoned nest. I don't have ostrich feed, but that's something I can buy. And in 1d6 plus 6 turns later, it will become a guarded nest. And this can be done indefinitely. But whenever you return to the same nest, it will only yield 1d3 minus 1 eggs. If you find no eggs, you may test your luck to find 1. When first rolled up, each abandoned nest has a 2 in 6 chance to be a sky burial site. Okay, so on a 1, 2, or 2, we have found a sky burial site. And a 2, we found one. Nice. Okay. Let's see. The remains of a mighty warrior were left for scavengers to pick clean. Roll a d6 to find goods. Let's see what we find. A 2, 1, an enchanted weapon, 2, a mountain peak item. Okay, cool. So if you find that enchanted weapon, that's one of the things that will cause your countdown to tick away. So we found a mountain peak item, and I believe that those are here in our mountain peak items. Let's see here, mountain peaks, where are those? Okay, so let's see what we found on this mountain peak here. That is a D66 roll, reds first. 52. We found a signed recantation from notorious heretic mathologist. Okay, so I have no idea what that is. I don't know if that has any kind of mechanism involved in it. I could write that down on my inventory. That is a small item, and you can have up to 12 small items in your backpack on your inventory. And you can get other things like bum bags in order to hold more small items. So there are ways to expand your inventory. And so if we had some ostrich feed, we could put that down in order to attract ostriches, which would turn this into a place where we could actually farm those eggs if we needed to. And farming eggs is a really good way to make money, and it's also a good way to breed new ostriches in case you lose yours. Let's do one more hex here. Let's go into this hex here, and let's see what we find. So a D36, reds first. Okay, a 12. And a 12 here is a mountain peak. Okay, so we found a mountain peak. Let me draw this mountain peak here. So big mountain peak. Okay, so we found a mountain peak extending out of the clouds. And let's take a look here at the mountain peak. Clouds part to reveal a snow-racked mountaintop looming ahead. With no time to avoid it, it's better to land than risk crashing. Like a cloud island, it is a solid surface. Use Appendix A, page 2, to see what lies waiting. Optional. Roll under your ostrich flying to soar over the mountain peak, landing over only if you fail. No, I don't want to avoid it. I want to see what's on this mountain peak because I know that it's possible to find really cool weapons here. So let's see, mountain peak here. Sky feature, cloud island, mountain peak. Okay, so we have another D36 roll, so we'll do reds first, and that will be 25. So 25, we find an item. Awesome. Okay, so let's see, find an item, turn to page 14. Page 14, okay, so what item did we find in this mountain peak? And 44. And we found a penny farthing bicycle. Okay, I have no idea what that does either. But yeah, so I could write that down on my character sheet. Now let's see if there's anything else we have to do on this mountain peak here. If there was an avalanche, we have our rules for our avalanche, our snowstorm, our attack, and finding items. Finding items, for a list of the items you find, when an item is found, cross it off the list. So you can only find each mountain peak item one time. If you roll that again, use the next item down instead, starting at the beginning when you've reached the end. Let's see. Once all items have been found, you will encounter an avalanche. If you roll to find an item again on the mountain peak table. Okay, so small and medium items take up one inventory slot, and they can be sold at the castle for 5 or 10 silver respectively. Large items use 2 inventory slots and can be sold for 15. You can drop anything you don't want. There's a 2 in 6 chance that you can retrieve something that's dropped. And it's also possible to have one of those unsettling experiences on that mountaintop. But when you get into combat is relatively simple. Let's say that let me roll up a random encounter here on chart number 1, table number 1. And let's say that we were to come across, so this is a D36, reds first, and that would be a 12. We come across an airwolf. So an airwolf, we could write airwolf here on our enemy sheet here. All right, so airwolf. And an airwolf has a skill of 5. They have 6 stamina, 0 armor, and they do 1d6 plus 4 damage. So they have a skill of 5. My melee skill is 6. So that will give me a +1. So I get to add 1 to my die roll. They get to add nothing to theirs. So we're looking to see who gets the highest total. So, oh, wow. Okay. So he totally demolished me. I rolled a 2. That's a fumble. Something bad would happen. They rolled a 10, which does damage. So I would take 1d6 plus 4 damage. Okay, 9 damage. Ouch. But I have 2 armor. So I would take 7 points of damage, dropping my stamina down to 15. Okay, let's do one more round of combat. Hopefully I can get some revenge here. Come on. Roll better than a 1. A 7 to 9. Man, this airwolf is kicking my butt, but I get to add 1, which is an 8 to 9. He still wins. I could die from this airwolf, but you go back and forth like that. It's pretty simple. But yeah, overall, I think this game is great. I love a good solo hex crawl, especially when it is made with a whole bunch of random charts of really cool and fun and charming and weird and interesting things to find. And this one combines a really cool hex crawl with some management of your home castle, of building up your strong boxes and buying items. You can, when you find other rival castles, and you challenge their knights to jousting competitions, you can actually take over those castles and make them your other home. So you can expand your territory, which is super cool. You can find those floating castles that are abandoned and then have a little dungeon crawling mini game. Yeah, this game is just overflowing with super fun things to do. It's super easy to get into, especially if you have any kind of background with Troika or with Advanced Fighting Fantasy. You will feel right at home. As a matter of fact, you could combine all of these and have some kind of mega game. You could meet some of these weird creatures and these strange items from Troika and just incorporate them into your games of Flying Ostrich and Floating Castles. I think this works not only as a standalone game, but also as a cool solo supplement to expand Troika if you have Troika, because I know Troika doesn't include any official solo rules, but there are ways to play Troika solo, just like you could play any RPG solo. But using some cool stuff from Troika in addition to as a way to augment Flying Ostriches and Floating Castles is a really cool idea, and I like combining these. I like playing in this world a lot, and the mechanisms that Jeff Williams has created and presented make playing in this world really easy and super fun. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this look at Flying Ostriches and Floating Castles. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.